Welcome everybody to our Pillar Strength and Movement Prep class. I'm your health fitness specialist and instructor, Quinn Gabler, helping you out moving through this session today. So for today, we're going to stick with our routine of having a warm up, a workout, and a cool down to follow. Our warm up is going to be starting with the spine and the trunk, the shoulders and the hips, getting our cat cow, our bird dogs, and our kneeling Cossack squats all working together to try and loosen up and activate our torso and upper body, as well as our hips. Then we're going to work into our working sets, moving through a forward lunge, single leg RDL, a side lunge, a prone overhead press, some plank up downs, which I'll show you guys how to do those. And then we're going to do our leg raises, rotating reverse lunges, and finishing off strong with our push-ups and our squatting, twists. Once we finish out that circuit twice times through, we're going to go into our cool down, get a little bit of rotational work with our thread the needle, and then working into a pigeon stretch to finish out with our biggest rotation, which is going to be our lumbar twist stretch, laying on our side. So without any further ado, we're going to get started. So getting down onto your hands and knees here, we're going to get into our cat cow. So you want your hands about directly below the shoulder. We're going to drop the belly button down to the ground, curving out the spine, tilting the head up, looking up at the ceiling. You're going to pull the spine back up, curving out the spine up towards the ceiling, tucking those hips underneath the belly button and relaxing back out, dropping that spine down, curling that head up and relaxing back the other direction, tucking those hips and extending that spine up and lowering back down. All right, and from here, we're going to get into our bird dogs. So staying into that quadruped position, we're going to extend our opposite arm and foot out behind us. So bringing that hand and foot out, creating a nice long connection from toe to fingertip, sucking that belly button up to spine, keeping our shoulders and our hips nice and level. We're going to lower our knees back down and switching sides, extending those toes and fingertips out, sucking that belly button up to the spine, getting a nice strong balance between both knee and hand down on the ground and lowering down, extending back out, holding that solid position, extending that hand out, connecting that hand to toe, fingertip, all the way through, and switching sides. And once again, lowering back down. Good. From here, we're going to go into our kneeling Cossack squats. So we're going to bring one foot out to the side and lunge our hips down towards the heel, pressing back up, working in to the same side here. We want to try and keep our hips and our shoulders nice and square, facing open so that that knee is at a nice 90-degree angle with the shoulder and the hips. Keeping that belly button tucked in, sitting nice and tall, sliding back and forth. Good. Bringing that knee down, we're going to extend our foot out to the side, driving that knee out over the hip, and coming back and forth. Driving those heels through the ground, opening up that hip, keeping them nice and square, trying to keep that knee pointed out. And finish. Good. Now that we're nice and warmed up here, we're going to get into our forward lunge. So we're going to start with 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, out and in front of the hips, behind the hips as well. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking here. Having a split stance, 1 foot out in front, 1 foot behind. We're going to lunge our knee out over the toe and drive back up. You want to get a little bit of a wide stance here so that when you're dropping down, you can get nice and low into the lunge. Once you start to feel that heel pop up, we're going to drive back up into a standing position. Nice and stable press through the foot. And switching sides. Getting our other foot forward. Alternating that back foot and lunging out, keeping our weight over the midpoint of the foot. Belly button sucked into the spine, nice and tall. Driving, nice and even back up to that split stance, standing position. And done. Good. Next up, we're going into our single leg RDL. So bringing one leg up into a kickstand position, just barely keeping our toes on the ground so as to give us some stability. We're going to hinge our hips back behind us, standing up to a nice tall position, swinging those hips back, keeping our belly button sucked into the spine, torso nice and tall. As we lean forward, keeping that back flat, really reaching into that hamstring, getting a nice big stretch and contraction as we stand back up. Go ahead and switch sides. Keeping that torso nice and tall, back flat, swinging back and forth, a nice even pace. Couple more. And rest. Good. Feet spread apart. We're going to get into our side lunge here. Moving on to our next exercise. So as we get our feet about 2 steps out, outside of the hips, we're going to lunge out to one side, lowering our weight into the middle of 1 foot and coming back up into a standing position. We're going to lunge out to the other side and come back up to standing. Moving back and forth. Nice and even. Getting that weight over the middle of the foot and coming down to the other side. Driving that foot through the ground. Staying nice and tall. As we bounce back and forth. And rest. Very good. Next up, we're going to go into our prone overhead press. So laying down onto the ground, we're going to get our hands out in front. From here, we're going to bring our hands up from the ground, bringing our chest up. We're going to pull our elbows down towards our hips, keeping our shoulder blades pinched together. Like we've got an orange in the middle of the back. We're going to press our hands up overhead, extending out further and bringing those elbows back down towards the hips. Pressing out overhead, extending those hands out. We're going to bring the elbows back down, moving in a nice overhead pressing motion, keeping those shoulders pulled up, keeping those hands up off the ground, and relaxing back down. Very good. Next up, we're going to have our plank up downs. So we're going to start in our plank position, getting our forearms down to the ground. Now from here, you can either get one foot up like this and bring yourself up, up, and down, down. Or we can get both feet up, knees up, and bring ourselves up and down. From the forearms up to the hands, alternating up and down. Trying to switch sides as we come back up. So not popping up onto the same side every time. Couple more. And done. Good. Next up, we're going to go into our leg raises. So laying flat onto our back. We're going to extend the feet out all the way, getting our hands underneath the hips, pulling our lower back down into the ground. We're going to suck our belly button to spine, pull the feet up, and slowly lower the feet back down. Tapping our heels at the bottom and sweeping back up. Slowly lowering the feet down, tapping, and coming back up. Getting a nice contraction through the lower abs. Keeping that lower back pulled down into the ground. And swinging back and forth. Getting a nice lower abdominal activation here. And resting. Good. Next up, we're going to go into our rotating reverse lunge. So, bringing our feet together here. We're going to start by stepping back behind us, lowering our hips down, and bringing our hands across the knee. So to rotate our torso around as we lower our weight down, keeping that weight over the midpoint of the foot. We're going to drive, tapping back and forth, moving nice and even, finding a good pace, and driving that weight up through the ground. Nice and solid, just taking those steps back and driving up and down. Oh, lost my balance there. And finish. Good. Next up, we're going to go into our push-ups. So coming down onto our knees or getting our feet back behind us. We're going to bring our hands just outside of the chest. As we bring the hands down to the ground, we're going to lower our chest down, keeping those elbows tucked to the ribs, pointed down towards the hips, pulling our shoulders back and down to keep them away from the ears and pinch together, having a nice strong torso and back as we drive that weight back up from the ground. Nice even press, sucking that belly button to spine. Got a few more here. Keep pressing. Almost there. And finished. Nice job. Next up, we're going to get into our squatting twists. So, first thing, we're going to get our feet about hip width apart. We're going to hinge our hips back, bending the knees. From here, we're going to bring our arms out wide. And we're going to open up our chest, reaching, trying to bring those fingertips as far away from each other as they can. Pressing one hand towards the ground, other hand up towards the ceiling, and rotating back and twisting the other direction, pressing those hands and fingertips away from each other, reaching up towards the ceiling, letting that bottom hand hang, and twisting back. Next one, rotating the other side, reaching up, and back down, rotating, last one, keeping those hips low, knees bent, and down. Good. All right, going into our forward lunge, starting at the top again. Starting our second round through, we're gonna extend forward out, getting a nice split stance. From here, we're gonna lunge forward, keeping that heel on the ground and driving back up, getting a nice lowered pace, trying to just load that forward leg, keeping the weight over the midpoint of the foot. As soon as you start to feel that heel come up in the front, that's when you know you're at the bottom of your squat or your lunge and you're coming back up. And switching sides. Bringing our foot forward and lunging down. When you start to feel that heel come up, that's when you start to come back up. Driving that weight to the middle of the foot and popping back up to standing. Nice even pace, going back and forth. And done. Good. Next up, we have our single leg RDL. So again, getting our feet about hip width apart. We're going to kickstand one of our feet, getting our knee bent and one leg straight, toes just barely touching the floor. We're going to swing our hips back, keeping our back flat and driving up into a tall position. Snapping up into that postured, nice, tall position. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Swinging those hips back and forth. Trying to keep the weight on one leg, reaching into the hamstrings there. Go ahead, switch sides. Nice, even pace, swinging back and forth. Almost there. And finished. Good. Next up, we have our side lunge. So getting our feet spread on either side, we're going to lower ourselves down to one leg, keeping the weight over the middle of the foot, driving back and forth, keeping that weight nice and steady, nice and spread. Really trying to feel the connection from the foot through the leg into the hips and the core. As we do a couple more here, trying to focus on that pace and control and balance. And done. Good. Next up, we're going into our prone overhead press. So laying down on the ground, extending our hands out front. We're going to pick the chest up with the hands and pull those elbows down towards the hips, squeezing our shoulder blades through the middle of the back, like we're trying to press the juice out of an orange. From here, we're going to extend our hands out, keeping those shoulders pulled back, down and away from the ears. We're going to lower those elbows back down, pointing at the hips, extending back and forth, reaching out overhead and moving nice and gentle through each extension and pull here. Driving back and forth. Almost there. And done. Very good. Next up, we have our plank up downs. So getting our forearms down to the ground. We're going to bring our hips up or pop up onto our knees. So we're either up on our toes or staying on the knees, popping up onto our forearms, into our hands, and switching knees throughout if you're taking that knee down route. Trying to get that shoulder strength, so keeping that weight over the shoulders as we come down and up. Nice even pace. And finish. Good. All right, finishing out strong here. Next up, we have our leg raises. So laying flat onto our back, we're going to extend the feet out, getting our hands underneath our hips for a little bit more leverage, pulling that lower back down into the ground, sucking the belly button to spine, and sweeping the feet up. Nice and in control, slowly lowering down and popping up as you start to feel that tap on the heel. That floor hitting the heel, popping those feet straight back up, getting a nice, even, swinging pace. Nice and controlled. Getting those feet up, keeping that lower back on the ground. And finished. Good. Next up, we have our rotating reverse lunge. So from here, we're going to have our feet starting at about hip width apart with some space behind us. We're going to step back behind, lower our weight down as we twist the body over and step back up. Stepping back and forth, keeping our weight over the midpoint of the foot. Getting a nice little twist as we load that leg and drive back up to the middle here. Going back and forth. A few more seconds. And rest. Good. Next up, we have our push-ups. So getting our hands down to the ground, getting our knees down or our feet extended back. We're going to lower the chest down to the ground, keeping our elbows pointed toward the hips and driving back up. Pressing through, keeping those hands just outside of the chest. Shoulder blades pinched through the back. And driving through our hands here. Nice even pace. Sucking that belly button to spine. Grinding out. And good. Finishing out there, we're going to do our squatting twists. So getting our hands about hip width apart, driving our hips back, bending the knees. We're going to open up the hands to each side and rotate, extending our fingertip down to the ground and towards the ceiling. Try to open up the chest and the lats through the back and rotating around Stretching through to the other side, extending fingertips to the floor and the ceiling. Nice and even. Rotating all the way around. Driving those fingertips from the floor up to the ceiling. And standing back up tall. All right, that is going to conclude our pillar strength and movement prep session for today. I hope anyone who stopped in here or is watching this later had a great workout. I know I got a little sweat going, a little bit out of breath. Those reverse lunges kind of did it for me, honestly. But I hope you have a great rest of your week, great rest of your day, and a great future. Stop in next time for all of our amazing classes. You can find the schedule on SharePoint.